Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. I'm your host, Calvin Timms. You can find me over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin, and just wanted to apologize for the delay in getting this video out there. But after the Dynasty quarterback rankings, I decided that I had to get somebody else on here so that I could get a little bit of pushback, because sometimes my views are perfect and sometimes they're not. So I'm happy to have Dynasty Analyst over here today to kind of give me his thoughts on my top 12 running back rankings and also share his rankings as well. Dynasty Analyst, he writes for the Sports Gambling Podcast, Fantasy Coaches Podcast, and a few other sources. So go follow him on Twitter as well. Make sure you're following his content. He's got some good Dynasty content for you guys to look at. He's really been jumping into redraft lately, but right now we're going to be talking Dynasty running backs for you. So today we're going to be going over our top Dynasty running back tiers for 2022 and beyond. And with that said, how you doing?
I'm doing fabulous. Thanks for having me on. I love the podcast, and I'm happy to finally come on. We've been in a fantasy league for a while now, so finally good we're getting to talk for once.
Yeah, we'll be able to break down our massive differences in the running back position that we seem to have after that league, all those years together there. So, all right. So today I want to start with tier number 1, and we're going to jump right into it. So tier number 1, we had about 2 guys that we both kind of had consensus on. We got Jonathan Taylor and not Christian McCaffrey, but Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift. That was who it was. Sorry. So we got Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, both in our tier 1s. Why do you love these guys?
Jonathan Taylor feels like the easy one. I don't think there's, particularly in a dynasty league, I don't think there's anybody who's ranking Jonathan Taylor not number 1 right now. He's, he's performed every season he's ever been on the field in the college NFL level. He's elite. I don't think you're going to get arguments there. Pretty the consensus number 1 running back in football. DeAndre Swift, though, I'm also a big fan of. Almost in the mold of like an Austin Eckler in the sense, he's one of those few guys that can catch 6 to 7 passes a game. Super young. Kind of had a bad luck with injuries these last couple seasons. I think we're going to see big future from him, though, kind of in the mold of a Dalvin Cook, who didn't kind of stay healthy those first couple years. I think as long as he stays on the field, the Detroit Lions offense is headed in the right direction. And I think is going to be really good in the future. That's my thought process behind it.
All right, I couldn't agree more on the top 2. Jonathan Taylor is just a stud. I mean, the dude's a freaking nature. He's a linebacker playing running back. He's only 23 years old, and we've seen what he can do through 2 years in the NFL. The dude's just a tank. He is the second coming of Derrick Henry, almost is what it feels like. But yeah, 11 touchdowns his rookie season and 18 touchdowns last year. The dude is just, you cannot stop him. So I'm with you right there on Jonathan Taylor. And then DeAndre Swift, I agree with you right there as well. I think that he's gotten a little bit of an injury bad luck. Missed 3 games his rookie year, 4 games last year, played 13 in both. But the dude is just a stud when it comes to the pass catching. He is just all over the ball. And some of the running backs, like Jonathan Taylor, he's a good pass catcher. Some of the other guys we have up here in these tiers, they're good pass catchers, but they're not the greatest at it. It's not their primary specialty. DeAndre Swift, you almost could say that he was made to be a wide receiver just in a running back body, because he's a short guy, he's really thick, but yeah, he just attacks the ball so well, which is what you love to see for fantasy football. Now, the biggest difference, and I alluded to it already, but one of the biggest changes for me personally in my tier 1 is I have Christian McCaffrey. Now, McCaffrey has burned people last couple years, so I totally understand the hesitation by the Dynasty community, but Christian McCaffrey is just so stinking good, man. He's just so good. How do we not have this guy as a tier 1 running back anymore? And I get it. He's older. He's 26 years old, but he's got 5 years of experience. He doesn't have a ton of tread on his tires. He hasn't really played in 2 years almost. So, it's almost like he's a 24-year-old in a 26-year-old's body in the NFL. So the whole ageist thing of it, I can't get on board with most people. Now, you could make the argument against the injuries that he's sustained over the last couple of years. Last year he played 7 games. People really thought that he was going to be back. It was a hamstring injury, if I remember correctly. But the dude, when he was healthy last year, just looking at his game logs when he was playing, 27 points in week 1, 24 points in week 2, 13, 26, 24. The dude just produces when he's on the field, and he gets more meaningful amount of snaps. The 14-point game, he had 50% of the snaps. The next week, 60% of the snaps, he had 26 points. He just produces for fantasy football. He's got Baker Mayfield now in this offense, and I think Baker, which everyone loved Kareem Hunt with Baker Mayfield, he's going to feed Christian McCaffrey all over the field, and I think that he still deserves to be a tier 1 running back until he proves that he can't stay healthy. 3rd time's a charm, 3 times I'm out. So difference here, why do you not have Christian McCaffrey?
We were talking about it a bit before the show. I try to get out ahead of things a little bit. I have Christian McCaffrey number 2 in my redraft rankings for clarification. But I have him considerably lower in my dynasty ranking because I'm willing to take the risk. You're right, that Christian McCaffrey in a redraft league, I'm willing to take that risk that he is going to be elite. You're absolutely right. He has the highest ceiling in the league. He could win your league championship this year, but he is one injury away from his dynasty value completely tanking. At 27 years old next year, 3 straight injury. This is hypothetical. 3 straight injury seasons, written seasons. That would be almost it for his dynasty. Then you could argue, well, then, okay, 27-year-old, he's still really good, but then he'd be a few years removed. So it's just there's a lot of risks to him. The Carolina Panthers offense isn't that great. Baker Mayfield, he's proven he's great in a bad offense, but he's going to have to be that good again after coming off of 2 injury-plagued seasons. It's just a lot of risk. It's a lot of risk for me in a dynasty league. I like to think in 3-year windows. I also like, I prefer guys who are going to have high dynasty value and perform. Like next year, Christian McCaffrey, considerably less dynasty value, no matter what he does as a 27-year-old. So when I kind of consider all that, there are some other guys I had ahead of him. Like I said, I have number 2 in my redraft rankings. Absolutely worth the risk there, and that's where I want to take him, though, is in redraft leagues, not in my dynasty league.
Fair enough. Just out of curiosity, so everyone knows Baker Mayfield is the new quarterback for the Panthers. 1-year deal with them. If Baker can return to not last year, but 2 years ago form, where he's not terrible, he's not an elite quarterback, but he's not bad, and they re-sign him to a long-term contract. Let's say he saves Matt Rule's job, single-handedly saves Matt Rule's job. Is Christian McCaffrey any more interesting at that point?
We're asking a lot. That's a lot of what ifs, but still, he has a great year this year, Baker Mayfield. But then he's still 27 years old. I'd rather actually buy Christian McCaffrey next year at 27 years old when he's going at a significantly lower discount, no matter what dynasty league. So that's when that's when I'd rather buy Christian McCaffrey. That's when I'd rather buy Saquon Barkley, guys like that.
All right, sounds good. So the biggest difference here, now you've got 2 more players in your tier 1, and I did talk to you before the podcast started, but essentially you have Jonathan Taylor in his own tier, which we're condensing this just a little bit here, but Jonathan Taylor kind of stands apart for you, which I can understand. The dude is just such a freak of nature, but the other 2 guys in your tier 1 are Javonte Williams and Najee Harris. So explain to me why you're so high on these 2 sophomore year players. I know what Najee Harris was able to do last year. I do understand that, but when we talk about risk with Christian McCaffrey, and I get the age risk, but there is a lot of risk, it feels like, around Najee Harris, which is why I can't personally put him in my tier 1, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it.
We saw last year just how this guy is a performer, in my opinion. I know he's a little bit older. I know his efficiency wasn't great last season, but he played with Ben Roethlisberger and had a terrible offensive. So I think the efficiency, I think that I don't blame him for that necessarily. I think like I said, I know he's a bit older and he's only in his 2nd year, though. Doesn't have too much tread on his tires for the NFL. And when I'm drafting running backs early in dynasty leagues, I'm shooting for guys who are good. Like I said, I'm aiming for 3-year windows here. So Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, 2 guys that I'm really big. Like I said, I think are going to be kind of keep their value for the next couple of seasons, and that's what I'm looking for. Now I have them both as top 10 running backs in my redraft ranks. Like I said, my dynasty rankings and my redraft rankings are pretty different. I have Javonte Williams and Najee Harris both in my top 10, but closer to 10 than in my top 5 for redraft. But in my dynasty leagues, though, I love their potential. Javonte Williams is already in a great offense. By next season, I think he's going to have a firm control of that job. Although I do have him number 8 in my redraft rankings as well, which is higher than most. So I think he's really going to start taking some more of that workload this season from Melvin Gordon. Najee Harris, it could be. I don't think his situation is going to. Other than I have him a little bit lower than his finish last year because of the. I don't anticipate Kenny Pickett or Mitchell Trubisky to throw 605 times like Ben Roethlisberger did last season. So those receptions, I think, are going to come down a little bit.
Just a touch.
So I do think he's good. I do have him a little bit lower than his finish last year, but he could lead the league in carries. And so I'm a big fan of him. I think I know the Pittsburgh offense is a little bit shaky, but as Kenny Pickett takes over and hopefully gets more comfortable, I trust Mike Tomlin to figure it out.
Definitely. And I will say on Najee Harris, he's not out of my top 12. He's just not in my tier 1. And I guess that'll be a perfect transition here to the tier 2. But before we jump into tier 2, for these top tier 1 guys, out of all these guys, so Jonathan Taylor, because this is Dynasty, right? I want to give the listeners some actionable information that they can use for these rankings, right? So on my list, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, we both got both those guys. Would you say either one of those is a buy, sell, or hold at current value for both of those players?
I would put Jonathan Taylor as a hold. It's hard to buy and it's hard to sell him. I don't want to sell him because he could win my league championship this year, but I also don't want to buy him because in a dynasty league
costs a little bit. Yep.
Yeah, so that's a tough one. And DeAndre Swift depends on the owner. He's probably on an owner who really likes him. I mean, I've seen him go for fairly cheap. Like I said, he's probably with an owner that already likes him a lot. But it's worth kicking the tires. Like I said, I have him as my running back 3 overall. I've seen him considerably lower that in a lot of people's dynasty rankings. So, it's always worth checking in. I believe I traded, Dobbins and Jameson Williams for DeAndre Swift earlier in the offseason. That might not be available now, but, just for trades like that, maybe trading like an upside wide receiver 2, kind of with a guy maybe like J.K. Dobbins or Akers would be a move I would explore.
Gotcha. What about, so obviously Christian McCaffrey, you're selling him at current value based on what I'm hearing, even though he could be a league winner, but in Dynasty, you think that he's probably worth a lot more in a trade than he would be on the field?
That's for me. Yeah. I'm trading out, I'm looking for a guy, I'd rather add a little bit to Christian McCaffrey and try to get a guy like Najee Harris, Javonte Williams. Maybe they're not going to perform quite as well this season, but I'd be much more comfortable with them in the future. Christian McCaffrey, he's no matter what kind of season, if he has 2,000 yards this season, his value is going down next year considerably. No matter what, he could have 2,000 yards. So and then you're kind of, and especially if he did have an injury, God forbid, his value is really going to tank. So, that's just a risky for me in dynasty leagues. I'm a little bit more, I play a little safer. I play very risky in my redraft leagues, a little safer in my dynasty leagues, and I play for the future a bit more.
Okay. So I would agree with you on JT. He is very hard to get right now. He's very hard to move. So, if you have him, you're basically holding him. You can send the world for him. If you're one piece away, maybe go get Jonathan Taylor, but it is just going to cost you so much to go get him. I would agree with you, though. I think Swift is probably the cheapest of these tier 1 guys, just based on what he's done the last couple of years. Like, people like Swift, so you're probably right. He's probably owned by someone that really likes him already, but it's very hard not to try and take a stab at him. He definitely does seem to be going the cheapest out of all these guys. Now McCaffrey, I'm definitely probably a buy, to be honest with you, because personally like we just talked about with Jonathan Taylor, he's a league winner, right? Christian McCaffrey, when he's healthy, he is a league winning player. If you're in a league where the Christian McCaffrey owner is nervous because of the injuries, 2 years in a row, he's kind of screwed people based on injuries. If you can find him for a cheaper value, I think that his reward and his return that he'll be able to give you in fantasy points this year and probably next, he's definitely up there in age. He's coming towards the cliff, but if he stays healthy this year, which isn't that big of an ask, I think that his reward is just going to be very much worth what you're going to give up for him in a trade. But I can definitely understand the risky side of that as well. Now, your two guys here, Najee Harris and Javonte Williams. Javonte is the one that I'd be trying to buy potentially if it was me. Najee, I'm probably trying to sell. And that will lead us right here into the tier 2, because while I'm not as high on Javonte or Najee as you are, I do have Najee in my tier 2 rankings here, and I do have him over here. The biggest downside with Najee Harris, and this is why I can't put him as an elite option right now for fantasy football. Last year as a rookie, very, very good. Very obvious that the offense ran through him. Ben Roethlisberger did not have it left in the arm. He was just, you could tell he's well past his prime. Finishes the RB3 in PPR, 94 targets, 74 catches. I think that the ratio there is great, like roughly an 80% catch rate. Najee is very good in the passing game. He can catch very, very well. I just do not expect him to get nearly as many targets in fantasy football this year. And then you take into account the new offense with either Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. Both of those are mobile guys. They might steal some of the runs. I just don't know if they might also steal a couple of the touchdowns as well. So I just don't know if he's going to have as many numbers this year as he did last year. He had a very good year for, just a rookie running back. Efficiency, like you mentioned, wasn't the best, but even if he's slightly more efficient, that'll make up for some of the lost numbers. But I'm just a little nervous about that. And then the biggest downside with Najee Harris, we're talking about age cliffs here. He's a 24-year-old running back already in year 2. He is an old player. Just when he came out of college, he was an old running back. And how many more years are you going to really have him as an elite option? Now, again, he's very good and he's very talented, so I can understand it, but that's the only difference there with me. We saw him in year 1. The offense basically ran entirely through him, and I think it's going to run through him again this year, but they are hoping that with these younger quarterbacks that they're going to be able to feed the wide receivers, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, George Pickens, those guys a little bit more on the outside, I think, and that might really eat into Najee Harris's workload there. So that's my thoughts on Najee. Javonte as well. He's someone that I love it. I want to put him in my tier 1. I really do. But I just want to see what the new coaching staff does with him. The new head coach for the Denver Broncos is coming over from the Green Bay Packers. We saw what they did over there. They've been in a committee system for a few years now, but Aaron Jones has always been very good for fantasy football. If they put Javonte in that role, I will fully admit that I could be wrong here and have him way too low in my rankings. I just want to see what they do with him with the split with Melvin Gordon this year, and that'll kind of give us an idea of what the next couple years will be in this offense. I like Javonte Williams' talent. He was very, very talented. You don't put up 30 points in one game, when you get most of the carries in that game out of nowhere. So he is a very good player, but yeah, I just want to see what they can do before I buy into him fully. Now, this tier, we do have a couple guys that overlap. We've got Joe Mixon is one of them. So if you want, go ahead and talk about Joe Mixon here to start.
Yeah, I have Joe Mixon as my RB7. He's in a great He's in a great situation. He's really talented. He's probably in the most talented skill position group in football. Joe Burrow at the helm. I know that camp reports have Chris Evans as a potential third down option, and Joe Mixon has never caught a ton of passes. I'm not too worried about that. I expect him to have a similar could push for 50, 60 receptions this year, which would mark a career high in my opinion. There's a lot to like. Talent, offensive situation, that they're going to be on the field a lot. There's going to be a lot of scoring opportunities. When I'm shooting for tiebreakers between players, I shoot for players in great offenses. Mixon, like I said, there's some risk. You'd like to see him catch the ball a bit more. So, that's why I don't have him ahead of Christian McCaffrey. But there's a lot to like there, and the offensive situation is what I like the most.
Sounds good. And the other guy we share here is Saquon Barkley. Thoughts on Saquon?
Saquon, I struggled. I had you change my ranking on him right before the show. Barkley, I think at the beginning of the offseason, I even had him, I think probably ranked like RB 15 or 16. But man, just so talented. I'm falling for the Twitter pictures. I'm falling in love with the muscles all over again.
The workout pictures, man, they get you every year.
Got me again. I have already had him rising a bit, but I just keep moving him up. Like I said, he's my RB9. The talent is just undeniable. He has the highest ceiling probably in the league, along with Christian McCaffrey. I don't love the offense again. I'm not necessarily pushing to buy in dynasty leagues, just like Christian McCaffrey. I think that. I think he's going to be cheaper in a year, and I think he could just be in a better offensive situation also in a year, and you can get him at a lesser cost when he's in a better offense. So, I'm a little wishy-washy on him in dynasty leagues, but man, like I said, if he can just stay on the field and just show some of the, the worry is though that, the reason I had him lower earlier in the offseason was, Devontae Booker looked. Just produced just more than he did. Yeah. When I was the happiest I was last season when I had Devontae Booker instead of Saquon Barkley in my lineup, and I was getting 15 points out of Devontae Booker in the game. So that's the worry. But like I said, I'm falling for the camp pictures again. He's my RB9.
So the funny thing is, both of these guys were one off in our rankings. I have them at 6 for Mixon and 8 at Barkley. One guy here that we'll talk on here in a little bit, but I'm right there with you on both of them. Joe Mixon, best offense in the NFL in terms of talent, just absolutely loaded. They redo their offensive line this offseason. It's just guns up for Joe Mixon this year. And like you said, the biggest downside on Joe Mixon is he's a very talented pass catcher. If you look at his yearly finishes, he is almost like a 90% catch rate from the receiving role in the offense, and they just never give him a ton of targets. Now, of course, you get more targets, and that's going to come down a little bit. The efficiency would be hit a little bit with that, but man, there is no reason why they can't give him like 60 or so targets every single year. Like, he definitely should be getting that every single year, but this coaching staff really has leaned on Samaje Perine and Chris Evans in the third down role, so that's kind of a downside there. But when it comes to Joe Mixon on the ground game, he's going to be a monster. He had 1,200 yards last year, 13 touchdowns, and they rebuilt the entire offensive line. It's just going to get better and better for Joe Mixon. Really love him for Dynasty, and he's only 25 years old. Year 5, definitely has maybe 2, 3, 4, if we're really lucky, 4 more years left with this offense. So, yeah, I really like Joe Mixon for the next couple years to definitely help you produce for fantasy. And the nice thing about Joe Mixon is, last year he played 16 games. I was someone that was really nervous about Joe Mixon going into last season because I had the injury-prone moniker, kind of attached to him. But yeah, he was injured until he wasn't. Like I always say, until they can prove that they're going to be someone who deals with a lot of soft tissue injuries, they just don't. The injuries can fluke every single season. So Joe Mixon came back healthy, came back strong, and is proving it for Dynasty football. And Saquon, just like you were saying, very good situation. And I actually did manage to get Saquon Barkley in one of my leagues this year. Traded him for the 105 in the rookie pick. So basically Drake London for Saquon Barkley. I love it personally. I really needed a running back. Saquon Barkley with this new offensive system should be very, very good. And again, we're talking about these guys. Some of them, Saquon Barkley, he's 25 years old, but he really hasn't even played a ton in 2 years. So, he's a lot older in time, but his game experience is a lot lower, right? So I think that Saquon Barkley could definitely jump back. And one thing, too, to give Saquon a little bit of a break there, everyone always expects these guys to come off of injury instantly, right? And no one ever has any recovery time anymore. Saquon Barkley tore his ACL, and I think it was his MCL as well 2 years ago in 2020. And, came back last year. Didn't look the best, but he got that freak ankle injury when he was coming back. It's just an unfortunate situation. I think that buying the dip on Saquon Barkley would be the best thing for a lot of people. I know people are a little nervous about the new head coach, Brian Daboll, coming over from Buffalo. They didn't really use the running back. Do you have any fears about Daboll's running back usage with this team?
No. I think it's just going to take the offense a little while just to gain traction. Anyway, I think it's going to take. I think it'll take a year. I don't know about Daniel Jones as a quarterback. I anticipate he won't be the quarterback in 2023. I think the offense. Well, it's going to take. Like I said, that's why I prefer to buy Barkley. I'm more of a. I think he'll be a lot cheaper in a year. I think the offense will be a lot better in a year. So in my opinion, Barkley, I think his best years are ahead of him. I still think he's going to be playing behind. The offensive line's getting better than he could be playing behind one of the better offensive lines he's played behind. That's still not saying much though. So I'd like to. So I'd like to buy I wrote an article about it earlier. I'd like to buy Barkley in a year when he's a little bit cheaper at 26 years old. He's getting a little bit older. The offense is going to be better. I think that's when we'll see that talent really shine. But like I said, I'm not too down on him. I still have him at RB9. I keep inching him up.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I love the talent as well, and we'll see. The one funny thing is all the rumors that Jimmy Garoppolo, he's kind of the last quarterback standing that hasn't been moved this offseason, that everyone knows he's going somewhere, but nobody knows where yet. The funny rumor that I just saw the other day was the New York Giants were the front runners to land Jimmy Garoppolo, which would be the craziest thing ever. Who, in terms of mediocre quarterbacks, who do you prefer there?
I think that would be great for Barkley. Just a competent guy who would just hang on to the football for Saquon Barkley and give him dump off passes. That would skyrocket him in my rankings. I think Daniel Jones is a bit of a disaster. He has between fumbles and interceptions, he commits 2 or 3 turnovers a game.
Yep.
It limits the time Barkley's on the field. So I think if Jimmy were to end up with New York, that would be that would skyrocket Barkley up for me.
All right, so the last guy, and we'll just finish my tier 2 here. I have Dalvin Cook. I still like Dalvin Cook quite a bit, and the nice thing about Dalvin Cook is all these new coaching changes this year, Dalvin Cook is also one of those guys. The new head coach, I forget his name, coming over from the Rams, Kevin something or other, but it's a Sean McVay disciple, right? All these guys, McConnell, yep. But yeah, they're all the West Coast scheme type of guys. They're going to utilize one running back as much as possible, except for Kyle Shanahan. Pretty much everyone else just likes to utilize one guy as the featured guy. Dalvin Cook is a full offensive weapon. We've seen what he can do on the ground. Last year, not the best through the air, but one thing about the Minnesota Vikings that I see overlooked all the time in everybody's podcasts and rankings and everything, people are still so high on Adam Thielen. And I get it. Adam Thielen was once a great player, but everyone's acting like Adam Thielen is not a million years old. He's 31 years old. He's not prime Adam Thielen anymore. And if Adam Thielen's going to take a step back, Justin Jefferson's still a baller. KJ Osborne, Amir Smith-Marset, those guys are kind of interesting. Irv Smith. But I think Dalvin Cook is going to have a massive uptick in targets this year. And I get it. The dude's been banged up pretty much every year of his career, but we can basically pencil him in for about 14 games every single year. Now, that's the biggest downside. I will say Dalvin Cook maybe is the best time to sell out of all these guys. It's time to sell Dalvin Cook. But I just think that he's going to be able to produce definitely this year, and I think next year as well. They just signed him to a long-term contract, so they want to use him, and I think that the new coaching staff is going to be able to maximize his talent much more than the old coaching staff was. You know, you knew that they were going to run the ball a ton through Dalvin Cook, but the offenses were so terrible every single year, and you know, it was just such a conservative offense. So I have Dalvin Cook here, and I know you don't even have Dalvin in your top 12. So what's your biggest fears on Dalvin?
You know, like, I always give my redraft ranking just to give people clarity to make their own decisions. I have Dalvin Cook as my RB6 in my redraft rankings, and I have him as my RB15 in my dynasty. There's always a big difference. And
Yeah.
you know, and you know, you can take that for what you will. You know, if you're a player, you know, who I'm playing for this season. I want to go for a championship this season. You know, you buy Dalvin Cook for higher than I have him ranked. So that's why I always mention it. I think Dalvin Cook's good. It could be in line for a great year this year. That's why I have him as my RB6 in redraft. There's just too lot. They're just like Christian McCaffrey though. There's too much risk for me to acquire him in dynasty. You know, I remember. You know, this is a really funny story. There was a guy in one of my leagues after he initially got hurt last season. I don't remember if you remember the storylines, but they were really, really bad right off the bat. And I had a guy in a league I commissioned. He sold Dalvin Cook for Alexander Madison straight up.
Wow.
And so you know, and we all gave him crap for it immediately, but you know, but it was just like the headlines were really bad right away, and you know, and it was a bad shoulder injury. Dalvin Cook continues to have injuries pile up. He has a lot of trend on. You know, this is just where we see running backs fall off. Is you know, there's been 3 running backs over the last 3 years who have finished with as an RB1. At 27 years or older. It's Cordarrelle Patterson, Mike Davis, and Mark Ingram. It's you know, at this age, considering, you know, the athletes on the defensive side of the football, you have 250, 300-pound men just, you know, running 4.5 and hitting you at full speed.
Yep.
You just can't do it for very long.
Yep.
And, you know, the wheels are, you know, it's not a matter of if the wheels will fall off. It's a matter of when the wheels fall off. So, you know, just a guy like Dalvin Cook, just not a guy I'm buying in my dynasty leagues. I'd rather get my exposure in my redraft leagues where I can maximize his skill set of being, you know, a great running back who could have a great year, but I don't have the long-term commitment.
Sure. No, I get that. And they call it the running back cliff for a reason, right? There's some people that buck the trend, you know, Adrian Peterson playing until he's 100 years old, Frank Gore, those type of guys, but they're not really the best for fantasy football anymore, right? And time is undefeated, right? Except for Tom Brady, it gets everybody in the end. Tom Brady's the only guy that continues to continue to play on and on and on. But I think that's kind of warped people's perspectives a little bit. You see so many guys just playing later into their careers, and yeah, it definitely... It might have shaded into mine, but I just think, again, Dalvin Cook this year and next year, when we're talking about a 3-year window, if I can get him as a top 10 running back in both of those seasons, I would take that chance personally. But I can definitely understand the fear on him, definitely with the risk. And my funny Dalvin Cook story, like you were saying, the news stories right after he hurt his shoulder last year were terrible. So I came up with this master plan in my home league, right? My work league. And what I did was I manufactured a trade for Dalvin Cook where I got basically Dalvin Cook and Ryan Tannehill, and it's a 1-quarterback league, so you know quarterbacks really don't matter. So I got Justin Fields in the return, so Tannehill for Fields, whatever, it's a wash in Dynasty 1-quarterback. But basically I sent Dalvin Cook for AJ Dillon and the 105 that I traded for Saquon Barkley this year, right? But I sent the whole master plan of this story was I sent Dalvin Cook to a guy that was right on the fringe of playoffs. He needed to win out to make playoffs. Dalvin Cook comes back the week that I sent him the trade, gets 30 points, secures this guy playoffs, because if he would have missed playoffs, it wouldn't have been the 105, right? It would have been a top 4 dynasty pick. So I was like, I have a very good odds of a top 4 pick here. But Dalvin Cook literally came back, secured the guy playoffs, and then did nothing the rest of the playoffs. So I was like, my master plan didn't work too well. But Yeah, Dalvin took it a little personal. We'll say that. So. All right, so the rest of the guys on your tier here, I don't have one of these guys. I don't even have in my top 12, which I'll explain when we get to him. But you've got Christian McCaffrey up here, so you're just a little bit lower on CMC than me. But you've got Austin Eckler, and then you've got the rookie Breece Hall as well. And I don't have a good picture of Breece Hall in a Jets jersey yet, but I'm sure he's going to look good in that mean green that they got going on over there. So let's hear your thoughts on these three guys. So we already kind of covered Christian McCaffrey. I don't know if you need to cover him too much, maybe touch on him just a little bit, but give me your thought process on Austin Eckler and Breece Hall here.
Yeah, Christian McCaffrey, like I said, we kind of talked about him already. I have him as my RB6, so I still have him pretty high in my Dynasty rankings, but I have him a bit lower than you. Just that injury risk, just being one injury away, him and Dalvin Cook away from Dynasty value totally cratering. I like to build value over I like to treat my Dynasty team almost like a stock portfolio. I like to, increase my value over time. So, like I said, I have him a bit lower. Breece Hall I have as my Dynasty RB5. There's nothing I like more than taking a big risk on a running back and drafted in the first 45, 60 picks in those first couple first 45, 50 picks. They just have a great their bust rate is similar to a veteran running back bust rate, and if they hit, you got to run. You have somebody who's going to shoot up in the rankings. Najee Harris, Javonte Williams last year shoot up in the rankings after their rookie season. Prior to that, you have guys like Jonathan Taylor, Josh, J.K. Dobbins and Akers, had bad luck last summer, obviously getting injured, but they were skyrocketing.
Oh yeah, last year Akers was what, number 4 in Dynasty rankings. So yep, you're right there.
Like you're just getting a guy who like I said, their bust rate is similar to a veteran running back, and you're getting a guy who could just skyrocket up rankings. I have Breece Hall as closer to maybe a high to mid RB2 in my redraft. So that's why I always mention it. Just take it for what you will. I have him as a mid to high RB2 in my redraft rankings. But I have more as high already my Dynasty RB5 just because I'm kind of projecting a little bit out there. But I think he's gonna have a very long, successful career. Kind of drawing. I need to look closer at it, but he's kind of drawing some Jonathan Taylor comparisons this week on Twitter with some stats and everything. Just elite athletic profile.
He's a big dude.
Like I said, the guy I'm willing to take a risk on. Great PPR running back. The Jets should hopefully be on the up and up. If Zach Wilson doesn't show it this year in this offense, I think they might go ahead and pull the trigger on that. So I have him really high. Austin Eckler, tier 2 for me. I know I'm a massive ageist in Dynasty, but Eckler's still great PPR running back. I guess I have him that high, just like you were saying. I think he could be a top 10 running back for the next couple of seasons. And I think he's a little bit safer than Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook as far as the injury concerns go. So I have him as my RB8, a little behind Christian McCaffrey just because he doesn't have that upside, but I think he's a really safe, rock-solid offense. And that offense is fantastic. He scored 20 touchdowns last season. He could do it, maybe not 20, but he's going to score a lot of touchdowns again this season. So he's somebody else I'm pretty high on.
Yeah, so the one guy that I don't have in my top 12 is Breece Hall here, and I totally understand. Yeah, I totally understand the thought process behind it, right? The buying the youth early. But the problem with Breece Hall is not really him. I think that he's an athletic monster, like you were saying. But I just am a little concerned about the coaching staff. This is what is it? It's Matt LaFleur, Mike LaFleur. Matt LaFleur is the Green Bay coach. Mike LaFleur is the offensive coordinator here for the Jets. And they just love, like I said, he's a direct disciple from Kyle Shanahan, who, unlike most West Coast offenses, loves to just switch up the running back, so you never know which one is going to be. And Michael Carter is a very talented pass catcher. He's a good running back. He's smaller. That's the biggest downside on Michael Carter. He's just not as big. But Breece Hall is a monster of a human being, right? When it comes to the running back, he's a Jonathan Taylor-esque type of runner. But I just am a little concerned about the coaching staff utilizing Breece Hall to the fullest potential that he has for fantasy football. I think he might be a really good running back for the NFL. I just don't know if he's going to be elite for a fantasy option. So that's putting a lot of ifs into Zach Wilson taking a step forward, this coaching staff taking a step forward in terms of offensive play calling, which is a big red flag there. And again, if we're talking about maybe 2 years away from Breece Hall, I'd rather pass on him, let someone else take that risk. And if he doesn't perform well for the next couple years, then I'll buy him cheaper in a year's time or 2 years' time after there's a little bit more red flags on his profile. I love the talent. I just don't trust the situation as much. And that's sometimes worked out well, and it's sometimes burned people pretty badly. Like Clyde Edwards-Helaire was someone that people didn't love the talent, but loved the situation, and it blew up in everyone's face. So DeAndre Swift, people love the talent, didn't love the situation, worked out well. So, he could definitely be another DeAndre Swift, but I'm a little nervous about it, and that's why I don't have him this highly, but I fully understand your thought process there. Austin Eckler. Yeah, Austin Eckler.
Sorry,
yep.
I just couldn't. Sorry, I had to stop you for a second with the Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I just having flashbacks of running back to drafting him number 1 overall in my Superflex league.
I made the mistake in 3 leagues. I could have had Jonathan Taylor in 3 different leagues, and I took Clyde over him. Dumbest thing I've ever done, I feel like, but yeah, I feel the pain. I do feel the pain. So does that mean that Kenneth Walker is going to be the guy this year? Is that what this is telling us? Oh man.
Oh man, it hurts. It hurts. But no, I think I just as a Chiefs fan, I just bit too hard. I bit too hard into the hype.
It's hard not to. I understand the Clyde thing, but they just never utilized him correctly, right? So. But someone that that does get utilized correctly is Austin Eckler here, and with the Chargers. And I don't have him as my tier 2, but just a quick hint, he is number 1 in my tier 3. I love Austin Eckler. The only problem with him, the reason why I have him a little bit lower than you, is just the age situation. He is definitely someone that is starting to come towards the end. He's a small guy. He's 5'10", 200 pounds. They added Isaiah Spiller, who I personally love quite a bit. 6'1", 225 on Isaiah Spiller. They have been looking for a guy to complement Austin Eckler for a couple years now. Austin Eckler, if you look at his production on the touchdown over his career, essentially, 2 touchdowns, 3, 1, 12. Last year is such a massive outlier in terms of touchdowns on the ground. He's always been a great touchdown threat through the air, and that's where Austin Eckler is just a monster. He's a very good receiving back, just like DeAndre Swift. But I think that Isaiah Spiller is going to really be utilized quite heavily to spell Austin Eckler on the ground. And they just haven't had anybody to do that in the last couple of years. So I'm really thinking a lot higher of Isaiah Spiller than consensus. And that's why I dropped Austin Eckler just a little bit due to age and then the non-guaranteed workload on the ground. I think that Austin Eckler is going to be very good. I think he's going to win people weeks, but I just think that he's a little bit more volatile due to that reason right there. So before we jump into my tier 3, where Austin Eckler is going to be the first guy there, what is your thought process? And we'll just run through them real quick. So buy, sell, or hold on Joe Mixon.
Ooh, I'm going to say hold. Not it's not a guy that I spending a bunch of assets on a running back in Dynasty that's ranked that high. That usually isn't my strategy. I usually like to try to get my running backs a little bit cheaper, and or buy a guy who's really young. So he's not really a buy for me necessarily, but if you're selling, if you're in a rebuild, of course it's a sell.
Sure.
It's an easy sell in a rebuild to try to get a value like that, but he's not a must sell for me. If you're contending or anything like that, I'm willing to ride it out in that offense. So I'd say a hold.
Okay. Saquon Bart, and I'm with you right there. I think hold unless you're in rebuild. Basically, if you're in rebuild, any of these guys, maybe except for Javonte or Brees Hall or Najee Harris, you're selling all of them, right? So just real quick summary there, so we can save that piece of it. If you have Brees, Najee, or Javonte, and you're in full rebuild, keep those guys, but otherwise sell everyone here. But if you're trying to contend, we'll look at it from that lens, right? So if you're trying to contend, mix in your good.
Oh yeah, no, I was gonna say yeah, that's easier. Yeah, good caveat there. So yeah, I would say a hold for me.
Okay.
So
And I'm right there with you. I think Mixon, perfect hold. He's a little risky to buy, basically like you just laid out there. Saquon Barkley, for me, I think that he's a buy personally, if you're contending. But yeah, let me. What are your thoughts on him?
that's another tough one. Right on that line, it just really depends on the owner with a guy like that. It's not the exact same, but I sent a late second and Christian Watson for Derrick Henry the other day. And Saquon Barkley, maybe not traded that low, but there's always buy low opportunities for an owner who's worried still. That's not necessarily everybody. So if I was, oh, I guess I would say buy maybe for if I had to lean one way, but it really does depend on the owner. That it's not super obvious. His value just he's one of those guys whose value really really depends on the league that you're in and who has him. I've seen him. I've approached owners about him who want sky high value, and I've also seen him go super cheap. Just depends on the league.
All right, Dalvin Cook, you're sell, right? I'm guessing.
Yes, I am definitely a sell on Dalvin Cook. Although, man, it's just the guys like Dalvin Cook. There's people who like yourself, who talk about him as still an elite running back. But man, these type of running backs are really hard to sell in dynasty league.
They are very very hard.
Like it's just like no, like people. I feel like a lot of people kind of feel like me, and they're not buying running backs like Dalvin Cook, who are 26 years old now. That creates interesting buy windows for guys like yourself, though, when people want out on these running backs, guys like yourself might be poaching them, and he might give you some great value this season. So,
You're subconsciously letting out my entire dynasty strategy when it comes to trading. All right, so you think he's a sell for the most part, unless you can get him for, obviously if you can get him for super cheap. Najee Harris, even if I'm a contender, I'm probably looking to sell Najee just for the depth that I could get personally, but definitely probably a hold for you.
Yeah.
Javonte, same thing.
Yeah. Well, right now I'd buy Javonte. I picked him up. I've turned like 4 or 5 Dobbins shares. Javonte, adding like I was talking about earlier, just adding like a wide receiver 2 to J.K. Dobbins and getting Javonte Williams. Like I added Kenny Pickett in the Superflex League to J.K. Dobbins and get Javonte Williams. I'm just a big fan of the talent.
That's such a steal.
Just a big fan of the talent. He's just a guy. He had the most tackles broken per play last season. Just a super talented guy. I just keep anticipating him to take more of the workload. Najee Harris, I mentioned earlier offseason, I'm holding him for another year. I think next year, I think you'll see maybe me wanting to sell him just based on that age, like we were talking about, just being an older running back, 25 years old, because I think he's going to have a good year this year. I think he's going to stay up in those dynasty rankings. So, I want to ride him this season. I want to ride that really. I think the Pittsburgh offense, they might throw. They might try to throw 20 times a game. So Najee Harris, despite maybe less PPR value, he's going to be running the ball a ton, kind of Derrick Henry-esque, I think. So I want to ride that this season and maybe sell afterward.
All right, Eckler, if you're in contention, is probably a hold for me. I'm probably not giving up anything of value for Eckler. Again, I'm very high on Isaiah Spiller, so kind of shades me a little bit on him. But do you think he's a buy or a hold?
Oh, man. I know I have him fairly high, and I have him even higher than you. And when I have a running back like Eckler, I was telling you, it's kind of painful for me to put him up that high, that hold. So I mean, if I have Eckler on my dynasty team, I'm really trying to get. I'm probably sending out a lot of offers trying to sell him.
Sure.
Um,
Maybe you can
just
pair, like you were saying, like a Kenny Pickett or something. Instead of J.K. Dobbins, maybe you can pair something with Austin Eckler and get someone like
yeah,
Javante. So there you go. There's some actionable advice for you. And then Brees Hall, if you're in contention, I'm selling because I don't think he's going to have that good of a year this year. But you could also hold him. This is my problem with Dynasty. This is what gets me in trouble is I always sell the elite options before, for like 3 other pieces. But yeah, I can understand people. I just don't think he's worth it to buy if you're in contention.
yeah, I'm a big Brees Hall guy, so I'm buying right now. I've seen him go too high for me. I've
Fair
seen
enough.
him go, in the mid, in the mid second of a super flex startup draft, and that that's too high. But once we get to that third round, I start thinking about Brees Hall in the super flex league, and I haven't done any one quarterback leagues in a while, but I imagine you take out the quarterbacks. I imagine you get to that second round. I guess is where he'd want to go, that early second. I think that's a good buy right there.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. It's definitely what it feels like. But yeah, see, to me, that's just too rich. Where I don't think that he's going to be a top 12 running back this year. I could be wrong, but that's where I'm just a little bit more nervous than the consensus. I think so.
I got him I got him as RB20 in this, or no, RB20 in Scott Fishbowl. I want to say.
Okay. Not bad though. That's not bad. See, that's where I think he should be valued personally. But Dynasty we tend to overreact a little bit with with these guys. See Cam Akers last year, again those are unfortunate, but yeah, the running back position people tend to overreact on a little bit more than others. It feels like for Dynasty football. So, all right, so we're gonna jump right into tier 3. Now I already talked about it a little bit. I got Eckler as my number 1 guy here. I already gave you the reasons for him. I love him. I love the talent, but I'm a little bit more nervous about his potential production this year. And if Isaiah Spiller does take a step forward, like I know it's very common to hate on Isaiah Spiller because he had a bad combine, but the dude was talked about as the number 1, number 2 running back for a long period of time in Dynasty football until the combine. So people are sleeping on his talent a little bit too much. And if he does end up living up to that potential, like I think he can, that's just going to be worse for Austin Eckler next year as well. So I'm just a little bit more down on Austin Eckler, but I do still think he's an elite talent right there. Now, we have 2 guys here that we both agree on. We've got Cam Akers and Travis Etienne. Cam Akers with the Rams coming off the Achilles tear, and then Travis Etienne coming off the Liz Frank injury, I think it was, to his foot. So both of these guys are coming off injury. Why are you loving these guys so much compared to consensus? Because I know for consensus, both of these guys are not in the top 12 for anybody.
Just like I said, I'd like to buy the young talent. Akers, man, we saw it before. Yeah, he got rushed back, and so I'm willing to completely throw what he did in the playoffs last year out the window. That doesn't count for me. Come 6 months back from an Achilles injury, there's significant risk. We haven't seen a really running back come. We haven't seen an elite running back come back to form with an Achilles injury. But man, that offense is fantastic, and I think this will change a lot next year when we get that 2023 influx of rookie running backs. Man, we're at an age kind of cliff for a lot of the elite running backs in Dynasty. So it kind of pushes Akers up for me, even though it feels really risky to have him as my RB12. But I look at the age and kind of that offense, and it makes me take him over Alvin Kamara. It makes me take him over Dalvin Cook. It makes me take him over Nick Chubb. And, that's kind of the difference there. A lot of people have those guys ahead of him. I'm looking at the offense. I'm looking at the talent, and I'm thinking, I'm hoping that this modern medicine can get him back together quickly. So and I'm not really looking at last season. Like I said, you can quote those 3 his 2 yards a carry or whatever the postseason last season. That doesn't mean much.
That's the craziest thing about the Akers situation, right? So first off, he tears his Achilles. What was it in about a year ago now, right? It was pretty close to a year ago now, and 6 months later, playing in the playoffs. of the NFL, which is one, unheard of, but two, just absolutely insane. But the amount of work that they gave him in the playoffs was crazy. And I get it, he didn't have the best stats, but one, he was rusty. Two, he was coming off an injury that was supposed to be career ending. And three, it's the playoffs, man. They had the best defenses in the entire league. Like, I don't understand the argument that people are like, oh, he just wasn't that good in the playoffs 6 months after an Achilles tear. Like, yeah, you think? Like, he's still better than you would be out there. So, like, let's give him a little bit of a break there. I don't understand the massive disrespect he's getting because he was playing 3 playoff caliber defenses in his run there. I mean, none of those defenses were slouches. It was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Niners, and then the Bengals defense was still even pretty good as well, you know?
So yeah, exactly. And so I'm buying the talent there. I really like Akers. And then going on to the ETN, I once again I'm maybe buying a little bit into the summer hype, but I love, just like, where the new coaching staff, has in mind for him, kind of just being a PPR machine. I think it reminds me a lot of the DeAndre Swift situation last year. The offense might not be fantastic, but I think he's going to be maybe the featured weapon. And I think he's going to be great. I think, just like DeAndre Swift last season, he could be in contention, maybe catch 60 or so passes. And that's going to really vault him up in PPR leagues. I'd have to look at my redraft rankings. I feel like I probably have him, I think, as a high RB2. I think somewhere around RB15.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep.
Yeah, and I have him about RB9 in Dynasty, or RB10. No, I switched it. Before the show.
Yep.
Barkley ahead of him. So RB10 for me, Dynasty leagues. So just a small difference there, just because of the age factor. But I think he's going to have a great season. I've been buying him a lot, and I wasn't adding Dynasty leagues this year, so I haven't done a lot of Dynasty drafts this year. But in my best ball, my redraft league, Scott Fish, everything. I didn't draft him Scott Fish, but he's one of my targets. But yeah, I've been drafting a lot of ETN. Especially when he was being drafted as about an RB20.
Yeah,
he's been going up draft boards a lot.
Yeah, I've done quite a few mocks and a couple startups this year, and roughly around like round 5 is where he was falling for most of it. I think he's been rising since then. It's been a little while since I've done one, so he's someone that people are definitely coming around to. But I'm right there with you. I love him quite a bit, especially when you look at it. The only downside, before we get into the upsides here, the biggest downside is the new head coach, right? Doug Peterson coming over from Philly. They always used a committee system over there. Now, Travis Etienne, the committee here is James Robinson and Snoop Connor. James Robinson probably won't be healthy. He tore his Achilles last year too, really late in the year. I think it was like week 13 or 14 or something like that. And then Snoop Connor is a rookie. I think that Travis Etienne is going to have the primary workload out of this backfield. So I love that about him. But he's also playing with Trevor Lawrence, his college quarterback. The receiving options on this team, everyone laughs about him constantly, but no one ever wants to give any credit to Travis Etienne as probably being Trevor Lawrence's number one target that he feels comfortable with, right? They've got Christian Kirk, the $80 million man over here, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, Zay Jones. Like, none of these guys are world beaters whatsoever. And then you got Evan Ingram at tight end that they added. Like, there's no real competent pass catchers, in my opinion. Who's going to be getting, let's say Trevor Lawrence goes out there and throws for 600 attempts again. Let's say he has about 400 completions. That's a pretty good clip at completions. Where are all those targets going? Are any of these wide receivers really going to break 100 catches? Maybe Christian Kirk, because he's going to be the feature of the offense, but Shenault, everyone hates. Marvin Jones is like 40 years old at this point in his career. He's 32 going on 33. Evan Ingram, can't catch to save his life, and Zay Jones. Okay, so who's going to be catching a primary workload out of the air from this team? And I think it's going to be Travis Etienne. I think he could definitely have maybe even 75, 80 targets, maybe 60 catches, like definitely within the realm of possibility. So I'm right there with you. Love him for PPR systems. Now, You have one other guy in your top 12 that I don't have up here, and that is going to be J.K. Dobbins. You've mentioned him a couple times. J.K. Dobbins also coming off the injury. You got 3 injury guys here, but they're all young, and they're all very talented. The latest news on J.K. Dobbins we saw today is that he might not be ready for week 1, which he responded to Ian Rappaport and said, basically, bitch, I am going to be ready for week 1. So it's looking good for J.K. Dobbins. And on this team, he is very interesting for sure, especially for Dynasty. He's someone that I could definitely be lower on than consensus, and I fully admit that.
Like I said, it almost feels, it doesn't feel great to even have him here, but I just look at the offense, I look at the talent, and I look at the other guys around him. Nick, I talked about Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry. These guys are, they're at that AJ picks for me, and I really try to avoid running backs in that kind of, especially running backs who are 27 years old. And running backs who are getting close to that. So Dobbins kind of gets up here by default for me a little bit, but I do love the talent. The Ravens seem to really like him too. They're bringing in a little bit of help. So I'm hoping that he catches more passes this year. Even through his stretch run in his rookie season, he didn't catch a lot of passes. I have him a little bit closer as a kind of a mid-range RB2 in my redraft rankings. Just due to the age and the talent, I do have him as my RB11 in my dynasty rankings. I anticipate that to change a little bit after this season. I think we'll have a lot of those 2023 first-round rookie running backs. I think they'll be scattered all throughout these top 15 running backs or so. So I think I could see him going down a little bit next year. But just for now, I love the talent. The offense. I think the Ravens are going to get a little bit more back to normal this year, running the ball frequently. So I think he could be in for a good year.
Yeah, that 2023 draft class is going to really shake a lot of dynasty rankings up, depending on their landing spots and everything like that. But it's coming. That class is coming for sure. And yeah, it's going to be exciting once they do get here. But for now, like you said, J.K. Dobbins, I'm with you. I think that this is probably the best running back team, like rushing team in the NFL right now, just in terms of weapons and how they're built. But the downside for Dobbins is just that pass catching work. I don't see a ton of it for this team, but they've got kind of a stigma around them right now where they're just not going very highly. Nobody really wants to play for them. If the Hollywood Brown trade, he said he wasn't getting enough work, so he wanted out of there. They got Rashad Bateman. It's not the best receiving core, so it would be nice if they just started to dump it off to the running backs. But with Lamar's play style, I just don't know if that's entirely feasible. So it's definitely something that's interesting to watch. But yeah, I love the talent. I just want to see the situation for Dobbins get a little bit better. Now, my last guy is going to be another older running back here, Alvin Kamara, 26 years old. We know what he is. Dude's electric when he's playing. Now, the legal situation that he has going on this off season is not something that I'm really looking forward to. Hopefully that can get nailed down pretty quickly. But I'm anticipating him missing at least 3-4 games this year for his legal situation. It's all been settled out of court, I believe. But yeah, the NFL doesn't really care. So yeah, they'll bring the band hammer whenever they want, and they'll inflict it however they want as well. So I'm anticipating probably like a 4-game suspension either this year or maybe at the start of next year if they can take long enough. I think usually the suspensions are announced by now. It feels like we're kind of late this year, but I don't know if that's with the new CBA or what. Deshaun Watson's another one of those guys where they have suspensions coming. They just haven't announced them yet. But Alvin Kamara, he's just electric. And this Saints offense, I think that they're going to need him still quite heavily. It's definitely a better looking offense than what they've had the last couple of years. Jameis Winston at quarterback, I'd like him for fantasy. Don't really like him for real football. Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, this duo is back together. Michael Thomas, if he can be healthy, maybe. He's starting to post some more workout videos and everything, so he might be finally getting back. But Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry, nice combo right there of competent wide receivers, in my opinion. But yeah, I think that Alvin Kamara is going to be very necessary for this team. 32-year-old Mark Ingram is not going to really get it done. So I'm looking forward to Alvin Kamara, and I think that he's someone that, again, he's a little bit older, but I think that he's going to have a couple years left in the tank. And Alvin Kamara, we're just a couple years away from him being a game breaker, a true game breaker for fantasy football. There's every couple years, there's those guys that come out and they change the way that defenses have to cover them. Alvin Kamara was one of those guys. Tyreek Hill is one of those guys. I think Jalen Waddle is one of those guys as well. So you get those guys in real football, and it just changes the defense, and they break it. And fantasy is just the best piece of it, right? Because the one downside with Alvin Kamara, he's never been the highest in terms of attempts, but he's been extremely efficient for every single year of his career, and he's been extremely used in the passing game as well. So we'll see what they can do, but I do understand the risk with him with the extended age. What's your thoughts on Alvin Kamara here?
Just another guy that I don't love the situation anymore in the age. Sean Payton was a great offensive mind. I don't love, for right or wrong, I don't love going to a defensive coach really. I think the game's going toward an offensive, especially particularly for fantasy football. I think it would have been better to hire, one of these young, innovative offensive minds. Just because of that, there's, Drew Brees obviously retired last offseason, but, just things, I think it's transitioning in New Orleans. I don't think the offense is going to be quite as good as a lot of people hope. I think, so I don't, I think there'll be less plays, a little less scoring opportunities for Alvin Kamara. There's the risk of the suspension. Going to be 27 years old this next year. So, that all adds up to being a little bit of a sell for me. I have him all the way down as my RB16 in my dynasty leagues. I could see, I could look at any day and put him between RB14 and RB16 depending on the day I look at it. I'm always changing my rankings. But like a high end RB2 is what I have him at right now. I certainly could have a great year this year, but just where that usage is where it is and everything, a little bit lower for me.
All right, so Austin Eckler, already touched on him. For me, for contending, he's probably a hold, not really giving a ton of value for him. Alvin Kamara sounds like for you is a sell if you're contending for his current value. He's probably worth more on the trade block than he is for your actual team. I'm probably holding on Alvin Kamara personally. What do you think he's a sell?
It's so hard because I know dynasty leagues, and I know most managers right now. You go to 11 managers worth of trade. 8 of them have no interest in Alvin Kamara.
Yeah.
So it's a little tough. If I had him though, I'd be trying to sell. If I had him, I'd be trying to sell for his current market value. It's tough to get that market value. I know what he's ranked according to websites and everything. It's tough to get that value.
That's
I absolutely would.
Yeah, that is the biggest thing I've found personally. And I know you're in quite a few leagues. I love to trade in all my leagues as well. But so many times the rankings on these players, right, versus what their actual real world value is, it's so different. And I'm with you there. So that's why I'm probably a hold on Kamara, but I just don't think you're going to, if you're contending, I think he's worth more to your team than trying to sell him, because I don't know if anybody's going to pay for him. That's the downside there. But I think we can both agree that Akers and ETN are probably buys for their current value. They're definitely cheaper, especially for their ceilings. If those guys hit, they could definitely make a case for top 6 running backs for the next couple years. They could definitely vault up there. It wouldn't shock me whatsoever. So I would say buy on both of those guys for what they're currently going at. You agree there?
Particularly on ATN, I think he's a little bit safer. I think he's going to catch a lot of passes this year. I think he's a pretty safe option in PPR leagues to finish as at least a top 16, 17 option. Akers is a little riskier. I actually sold a lot of shares this offseason in trade, in very similar trades we were talking about. just trying to upgrade the running back position a little bit, trying to get guys like Najee, Swift, Javonte Williams. I do a lot of trades like that, especially with running backs. I prefer, with running back position in Dynasty, I prefer to either get an elite guy or just kind of hunt the position and kind of just try to piece together some guys later on in drafts. So, Akers is, but, just because of how low I didn't realize how high I was on him compared to consensus, but yeah, I would say I would agree with he's a buy, but of course, I always have to add. I'm always adding caveats. I guess you can always go down those rabbit holes. I guess I keep doing that, but I agree. He's a buy. A long way of going about it, but I agree. Buy.
All right. And then Dobbins, you're definitely liking it, but I think he's probably a hold right now just to see what he comes back, if he comes back healthy, and then what this offense is going to look like around him. If he's someone that the first game, if he comes out there and has like five targets, go grab him week 1. But for me, as of right now, he's probably a hold. I don't think you're going to get a ton of value for him personally, but his ceiling is very high. But yeah, it's just kind of a risk, He could definitely move both ways. He can move down or he can move up right now. So I'm holding on him just to see what that week 1 return looks like.
Yep, agreed. I would say, yeah, that's another guy. I've sold. I would say, he's a bit of a. And it's another guy. I feel like I have him higher than consensus, but I've been selling him all off season. It's a weird paradox in dynasty leagues because there's always one guy who's going to get the value that you want.
Yep. Yes.
So I have him, I guess, a little higher than consensus in a lot of dynasty leagues, but I've also sold him many times, like I've said, particularly for Javonte Williams. I've added like three or four trades just for adding, Kenny Pickett, or adding Jameson Williams, adding, I could go down a couple more trades, but adding players like that to get to Javonte Williams. But if at his current ranking, if somebody is valuing him as the RB 17 or 18 like his ranking, I'm absolutely gonna snack that up and buy. But I've also loved the idea of selling Dobbins for an elite option.
Sounds good. So that is our top 3 tiers here, top 12 guys for the Dynasty running back position. Just a quick recap. So Dynasty analyst, he had tier 1, Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift, Javonte Williams. My tier 1 was a little bit different with McCaffrey in there. No Harris and Williams right now. Tier 2 for him is Breece Hall, Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon, Austin Eckler, Saquon Barkley. I had Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, and Saquon Barkley. And then tier 3, final tier here, we got Travis Etienne, Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins for analysts, and Austin Eckler, Kamara, Akers, and Etienne for me. Now, this has been great. What do you guys have coming up next? What any articles you got coming out? Any podcasts, anything like that?
Oh, I just finished up around, it's been a crazy few weeks. I just started at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network as an assistant editor, and I started with Dave Heelman, who's at Dynasty Dorks, Justin, and Justin Bruni. And those guys are fantastic. They have a pretty large following on Twitter and everything. And we all just kind of started, the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. They have a pretty big website, but they're trying to bring up their fan content a bit. So we were all just getting started. We wrote a bunch of articles. It was kind of just me and Justin to start off with. So I've been writing a ton. I have a bunch of dynasty strategy articles on that website. I just put out a 2,500 word article on my top 10 dynasty, or no, not top 10 dynasty, top 10 redraft running backs. So it's just kind of been a whirlwind. I've been crazy busy. I just released a 4-part that coincided perfectly with your Dynasty Rebuild series.
I mean, you could have just asked. I would have given you I would have translated it all to word for you,
Oh, yeah, I just listened to your podcast and put it into word form. I put that on the 5 Yard Rush website. Those guys are a UK-based website. Those guys are fantastic. Awesome. The Fantasy Coaches Podcast is great. I always do a weekly staff article for them. So that's where you can kind of find my stuff. But I need to take a look at the calendar. I just finished up so much stuff. I actually don't even know what's next, though.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. I know for us, coming up soon, we're going to be doing the next podcast, whether it's this week or next week. I'm going to hopefully get another guest on the podcast, but I'm going to be doing the top tier wide receiver rankings and then following that up with the top tier tight end rankings to finish that off. And please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the video wherever you're listening to it. If you're listening to it on YouTube or Rumble, make sure you're commenting and liking the video. Subscribe to, just it helps the algorithm, helps all that stuff. I'm really trying to grow the podcast, just trying to get out there to more people. If you like content like this, just let me know over on Twitter. That's the best place to find me, myself. But I'm really trying to get more guests on the podcast, really just grow the podcast in more avenues as well. So thank you guys so much for listening, and good night.